I'm Kayo Chingonyi, the touring poet on the Out of Bounds Poetry Project, and I'm here with James Sinclair, a poet from Shetland who I met yesterday at the Shetland Create Evening that we were part of and that we participated in. It's nice to be here with you, James, and to talk a little bit. Nice one.
Nice to meet you, Kayo.
Yeah.
I really love your poetry as well.
Yeah, likewise. Yeah,
it's nice to experience different styles of poetry and different ways of putting words together.
Yeah, I think it was a really nice night for that. Different ways of writing.
Yeah.
Bit of crime writing, some kind of biography from wartime, and different styles of poetry. I was really drawn to what you were doing, especially since you use Shetland dialect in your poetry. Is that something is exclusive to all of your poems, or is it something that you move in and out of in your poetry?
It's probably what I write in mostly. I do write in English as well, but I find my natural voice is in Shetland, kind of the natural rhythm in my voice, because I didn't go to college or university or that to learn about it, and I just found it easier talking in my natural voice.
And who were there any poets that inspired you, or maybe not poets who inspired you to write in that voice?
Well, there are actually quite a few really good Shetland poets who haven't maybe been recognised elsewhere, and a lot of it came from their voice. And it seems the poetry and dialect seems a bit romantic at times, but I try and kind of maybe keep it as realistic as I can. Although I'm sure romance creeps into my poetry as well.
Yeah, I noticed in your writing there was a lot of humour in what I picked up. So I get a little bit of Scots, and so Shetland is slightly, it's a stretch for me to understand everything, but I got a sense and a feeling and an impression from it that there was a humour and wit in there that you were incorporating alongside everything else. I really enjoyed that. I wondered if I could ask you about how Shetland as a place inspires your writing.
Well, I'm a born and bred Shetlander, and I can trace my family tree back to the 1700s here, and so it's probably in the blood almost. And it's such an amazing place, and the weather, I think, changes it all the time. It just doesn't stay the same. It'll change right through the course of a day, never mind a week or a month or that. And I use the weather a lot in my writing. I find it's actually a great metaphor for life as well.
Yeah, I've noticed that kind of shift in different weather patterns throughout the day, even just a short time of being here, and also a lot of light as well. Yeah. It's not dark for very long, which is an interesting thing. I wonder, could you mention some of the names of those poets that you think haven't been recognised that are part of the poetic heritage here? Well,
there's a few. There was an English teacher who wrote for years and years and years and his pen name was Vagaland, and his stuff is quite romantic, but really catches an essence of Shetland for all that. And then there's other poets like Stella Sutherland, whose poetry kind of reaches. It's very Shetland in its words, but it kind of reaches further than that, and it's more about life than maybe even just Shetland itself. And there's a few more modern poets like Christine DeLuca. And Robert Allen Jimison, who've actually taken Shetland out of Shetland, and they both live in Edinburgh, but I think because they live in Edinburgh, their work's probably even more Shetland than the people who are writing here.
I see what you mean, yeah. Almost as if once you leave a place, you you have the space mentally to write about it somehow.
Yeah,
or you feel like writing about
yeah.
it because you're not there every day, you're not
Mhm.
seeing it every day. That's interesting. I'm also very excited by a kind of new wave of younger Shetland writers as well. I think we were talking at the Shetland Create event around some of those people as well, like Christy Williamson or like Jen Hadfield, say. Over the last 10 years or so, how would you say poetry has been taken up by some of the younger people around here?
Well, Shetland Arts has, in previous years, certainly pushed all of the art forms, including literature, and it kind of opened up more opportunities for people to express themselves. And I think through taking people in as writers in residence, which is how Jane Hadfield came to Shetland in the first place. She came as a writer in residence, and she inspired a lot of people. And I think it was because of kind of almost the left field way she writes. She writes in a style utterly of her own, and she uses Shetland a lot in that. And we've been running writers groups for the last 12, 14 years. I run the Lerwick writers group here in Baril once a month, and you met Doug Forrest last night. He runs the West Side writers group.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Out in Whiteness every month. And this is kind of maybe giving people an outlet to try things and speak to other like-minded individuals. Because it is a very small community. You've probably found that yourself, that the creative writing, and maybe poetry especially, it's a kind of village. Even across the nation, there's those connections
that happen. So I was thinking as well. I feel like there's a lot of variation even across Shetland in terms of what people are writing about, styles they're writing in. So how would you say Shetland's poetic tradition relates to the wider Scottish poetic tradition? Have you noticed any things that are different or similar? Or?
I'm sure most of this writing is inspired by a lot of the famous Scottish poets like Norman McCaig and George Mackay Brown, people like that who've kind of forged the way ahead, and Hugh McDermott as well. Hugh McDermott actually lived in Shetland for a few years between the First and the Second World War, and I think it took a while before even the local poets maybe really recognised how important that was, because that probably actually pushed it out to a wider audience as well, because he wrote a lot about Walsall especially, and a lot of his poems that he wrote down.
And then it spreads it out, I guess, into other spaces. I really love the way McDermott uses Scots, just loads of different versions of Scots. Words that maybe aren't current any longer, he incorporates them into what he's doing. Is that something you're tempted to do in your work sometimes?
Well, it is something I do. Like, I've written pieces kind of in. They used to have a completely different language for when the fishermen were at sea to when they were on land. It was a superstition thing, and that was based on the Old Norse language. And so they had different names for all these different land items, just so they didn't get any kind of bad karma off the sea and things like that. And I've used some of that, and even the Shetlanders can't understand that.
It sounds like there's something very fruitful in those different varieties of the language and different wells that you can tap into, I suppose, which comes out certainly in your work. So even if you don't know, your Shetlandic isn't up to scratch in that way, you can get something very strong from it, which is what I felt when hearing you read. Thank you for joining us and for sharing some thoughts with us. It's really cool to talk to you.
No, thank you, Kayo. It's
Thank
nice,
you.
really nice to meet you.
Nice one. Thank you.